Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maya Luria with TMC for Seniors, and I am thrilled that we are back on. Welcome to everybody. We have been off for most of the summer and had a class last week, and really this week we're really getting started with everything. So this month we're going to be talking about fall prevention, and today is Watch Your Step, Fall Prevention in Motion. Welcome. I've got Geneva Kaplan-Smith and Kirsten Shelby with me. They are with our TMC Outpatient Therapy, and they are going to sort of break down all about fall prevention exercises that can help. So welcome. How are you guys?
Wonderful.
Great. Well, I have gone ahead. I put your PowerPoint up so that you can go ahead and get started. If you are watching from home, please feel free to put any questions that you have into the chat, and I will ask Geneva and Kirsten afterwards. Thank you.
So just a quick definition. A fall is just an event in which a person ends up coming to the floor, not intentionally usually, or a lower level. And falls, trips, and slips can happen at one level or from a height. We know that about 12% of adults in the community fall each year. And those who are over 85 years old fall, 50% of those actually have falls. And 1 in 10 of those falls for those over 85 results in a fracture. The CDC has some data that basically every 20 minutes, an adult in the US actually dies from a fall. So that's pretty alarming to hear those statistics. And I think what can we do immediately? We know if somebody is walking, if their walking speed is about 0.8 to 1 meter per second, they need to have some intervention to prevent a fall. And what does that mean in miles per hour? That's I believe 1.8 miles per hour to 2.2 miles per hour. All of our smartphones now are calculating this data. If you're like, how fast am I walking? I have no idea. The phone in your pocket is probably calculating this and you don't even realize this. So pick it up and take a look at that. If you meet that criteria, or if you're having near falls often, or if you've had a fall in the last year, you probably should be doing something to prevent yourself from having more falls. Just some fun new technology I had to bring up just because it's cool. This kind of applies more to someone maybe in an institutional setting, but they're using radar to detect changes in people's movement. And they can now kind of see, oh, what is their baseline using that radar? And then if there is a mild change in that, they're like, oh, this person needs to have intervention for falls. So instead of having this reactive approach to falls, they're doing kind of a more of a preventative approach to say, hey, something changed with how they're moving around their room. It's not a video, it's not invasive or violating their privacy, but it's capturing how this person moved differently. So I thought that was really exciting. It's like, what other things can we use to be ahead of the game here upstream? And then also we know there's a bunch of devices out there that in the event that heaven forbid someone does have a fall, it will detect that and start a countdown and say, hey, okay, do you need help or not? Do you stop that countdown? And it used to be just one device out there. Now there's multiple brands doing this. So I think that's really exciting if somebody is living alone and wants some peace of mind. So let's see. So as far as risk factors, there are about 400 reasons actually you could fall, just to be exact. We're going to break out some of these in more detail, but I just wanted to point out that especially environment, because I have read about this all the time, I'm constantly going around my house and saying, okay, is there something in my path? Like, what did I put down that's going to get me, out one door is in the way? Do you have throw rugs? If you have pets, it's actually a big risk factor. They can get under your feet. If you're having problems with your thinking and memory and cognition, that can actually be something that's worth looking into some more. Are you having dizziness or lightheadedness? And patients in the clinic are always like, I'm dizzy. And I'm like, more detail. Are you lightheaded? Do you feel the room spinning? Are you spinning? Like, if any of those things apply, obviously those are fall risk factors. But I think it's important to figure out why, because some of those things we can treat, especially physical therapists. that's low-hanging fruit for us. When you come in, we want to zap that. We can treat the vertigo that is treatable and figure out how to accommodate for the other parts. If you're lightheaded when you stand up, is it because the medications you're taking for blood pressure may be making it drop, or if you're dehydrated? So things like that, just keeping an eye on blood pressure. And then if you're afraid of falling, that's a big deal. So if we can do something about that, maybe your fear comes down. We know if you take 4 more medications, 5 medications, depends on what you read, that's going to increase your risk for a fall, especially if those medications are sedatives. So things like Ambien, nighttime meds to make you fall asleep. Certain medications, it'll say on your inserts what, but especially the things that are designed to make you drowsy on purpose, like sleeping pills, those really increase the fall risk by 4 times, according to that study on there. Talking to your doctor about this and trying to get off the medications that it is safe for you to get off of, deprescribe what you can, that's huge. If it is not medically necessary for you to be taking all these meds, don't. So that's a conversation for you to have and to constantly be updating and questioning, because again, if it's not necessary, get rid of it. Having pain actually is a huge risk for falling. One study I looked at actually said that the risk goes up 2 times by just having pain. And then Harase did this study. They looked at about 400 people over age 70 with neck pain, back pain, leg or knee pain or foot pain in this group. And they looked at them for a year, and about 45% of them had a fall in that time, and 5% of those people actually had a fracture related to the fall. So yes, you can have pain and not be at risk for falling, but it does increase your risk. And so if we can address that pain, that's a big deal. Another thing I think that's worth noting, so in this study, they looked at how can we tailor all of the factors for people's fall risk to that individual. And some of the people, they basically said your risk for falling at the beginning of the study was 80%. And they brought it down to 27% because they said, hey, for this individual, we are going to do X, Y, Z. And they really made it specific to those people. What did they need? And a lot of them were diabetic and were female and had foot deformities. So it's like, okay, if you're really having a lot of foot problems, maybe we need to get you the right footwear to accommodate for that, or work on exercises to accommodate for that, or whatnot. It's like, can we really tailor it to you? So anyway, that was the take home. It's just like they dropped their risk from 80% to 27%. I know it says 32.
That's another study.
Yes.
It correlates well with just making sure that we detect kind of your risk for falling early so that we can do something about it, and that will lower your risk for falling. So what is balance? It's 3 different systems, actually. It's your eyes, it's your inner ear, and then your somatosensory system, which is a fancy word for saying in all of your joints and muscles, you have receptors that say, I'm here, I'm there, where did I move? That especially in your ankles, your hips, and then the top of your neck, your C1 and C2 area, you have a bunch of receptors there that tell you where you are in space, especially in those areas. So as far as vision, we know it's a huge risk factor. If you have trifocals, bifocals, multifocal lenses, right, that is a huge risk factor for falling. In this study, actually, they had people who spent time outside and they switched them to a single vision lens, and their fall risk came down by 40%. That's huge. I mean, it sounds silly, and some people I know never want to get rid of that, the progressive lens, and you know what? It depends on the person, but I think that's very interesting and should be discussed, you know. And then people who had cataract surgery, their fall risk came down by 34% when they had the surgery. So again, just things to consider, you know, what other risk factors are out there? Anything else on that? There was another study I found talking about cataract surgery, and when they corrected the vision in one eye, it improved your, decreased your risk for falling. But when you had cataract surgery for the second eye, it didn't really change your risk anymore. So all you really need is at least one good eye. But I think most people would agree it's a little better if you can see out of both eyes.
Let's see. And then our inner ear, our vestibular system. So this system actually is really exciting. I was reading an article and they were saying how the communication of the nerves in this area are the fastest in your entire body. Like, imagine that. And it's because you basically have these 3 canals on either side. And when you move your head, you have these little hair cells in the canals and some fluid and some rocks in there. And when you do that, that tells your brain, hey, your head moved in a certain direction. Or it also gives you a sense of gravity, that sense of where's vertical. So it does a bunch of things, actually. It's like your internal gyroscope. So anyway, this system is huge. 1 in 3 adults over 40 have issues with vertigo, with balance, actually, in the US. That's one statistic. And so this is something that, again, if you have treatable vertigo, which some of this, we can just do some maneuvers in the clinic and make things a lot better. If you have that flavor of vertigo, please let's treat it, because again, just low-hanging fruit as a PT. If we treat that system, then we can train all the other systems to work better and your fall risk comes way down. And we see this all the time. It's like 1 in 10 adults walking around over 65 has vertigo and has no idea. And again, it's just low-hanging fruit. Like if you're diabetic, you're more likely to have it. So things that we can treat. Let's see.
Yes.
Would you repeat what you said about if you have this vertigo or that vertigo?
It's like a positional vertigo. So I don't know if you've ever heard
I
about.
didn't hear, that's why.
Okay, a positional vertigo. So when your head gets into certain positions, you get kind of that full room spinning. And that's more just the crystals kind of in the wrong place in your ear. And so that's something that we can fix. Yeah.
Yep. And as far as that other fancy word, the somatosensory system, which is part of your sensory system, like, can you feel your feet? That's a big piece of this too. Like, can you tell where your joints are in space, period? So this is a big piece in terms of what we're trying to train in the clinic, but there are some cool devices out there now that one of them actually is in the US that gives your feet, it's like having 8 cell phones around your ankles saying, if I shift my weight over here, it kind of vibrates. And if I shift over here, it vibrates. So just some interesting things to try to help you sense, okay, like, where am I in space? And that's a huge system that if you can't feel your feet, your risk for falling goes way up. It's like we need to do what we can to give you a better sense of that. So what kinds of exercise are most effective for improving balance? So I keep going back to the study because everybody asks, oh, if I do exercises in sitting, is that going to help my balance? I'm like, no, absolutely not. It'll help your sitting balance, but it's not going to help you do anything if you aren't standing up doing the thing. So anyway, this is just a great article talking about, okay, especially in nursing home, what did they do for these people? If they did stuff in standing, they tend to get, lower risk for falling. We know that the things need to be including leg strength. It needs to be tailored to you, and it needs to be moderately intensive. If you're not sweating doing this stuff, it's probably not really doing anything. So why waste your time? So in terms of other specific things, we want functional exercises. Functional being, can I get up and down from the floor? Can I climb stairs? Can I go from sitting to standing? Just as an example. If we included exercises like that, the reduction of fall risk comes down another 24%. And then this is coming from the CDC compendium. There's a bunch of stuff that the CDC has on falling. They looked at having people do things like reaching up overhead, like just reaching outside of your base. So to stand again, which is functional. Walking and turning. Turning is such a big one that we all need to do a better job, especially as PTs, to make people really work on turning. The average person turns, 1,000 times just going around their house. Doing mini squats, trying to pick up their leg as high as they can in place, things like that. The bottom line with this too is adding some unpredictability to it. So this idea of if the wind blows me, can I react to that? That's a really important piece, because if you are just anticipating everything, you're probably going to fall if something hits you or your dog bumps you. Let's see. And then I love this idea too. this is something I think especially Kirsten and I are always trying to implement with patients in the clinic. How can we just build things into your day? So it's like, if you are doing laundry or something, like, can you add some movement to doing that? So like maybe every time you do, you put something in the dryer, it's like, okay, I do some heel raises, or I bring my feet together, or I stand on one leg when I'm brushing my teeth. Like, how do you build it into your routine? So you're not like, I have to stop everything and do 30 minutes of balance every day. No, just build it into your day. Or I always like to call it like a hallway drill with my patient, where it's like, every time I get on this hallway, maybe I walk heel to toe, or I do something where I have that hallway for safety if I need it. But there's some drill that I can do that challenges my balance in a way that's, I have safety in place. Thoughts there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Let's see.
Yeah, so Tai Chi is a really great exercise. Sorry. Tai Chi is a really great exercise for balance, and they've done lots and lots of studies on how it improves your balance. But essentially, it's making you have to shift your weight, right? So you're having to kind of be aware of your base of support. You're moving your arms and your legs and coordinating the two together. You have to think ahead. You have to pay attention to your whole body. And so it can be really great for balance. And so there's 4 different studies here, kind of of varying lengths. The first one had the biggest improvement in fall risk because it went for like 6 months. The next one was a little shorter. It's only 4 months. It decreased your fall risk by 46%. And then this third study here by Wolf actually took some time, and instead of just doing a group class, there was even some one-on-one time. And so they decreased by almost 50%. And then the third one didn't necessarily talk about fall risk, but it did improve your balance, your leg strength, and even some cognition things. So they did like a trail making test and things, some different cognitive tests, and they found that those actually improved after doing regular Tai Chi. And that one was only 6 weeks long, but they're doing essentially 3 hours a week for 6 weeks. So we have lots of great programs here at TMC. There's, I think, 3 classes at TMC for seniors. And then I have a very slow-moving adaptive Tai Chi class that we're doing over at the Outpatient Therapy that's starting here at the end of the month. So, yeah. What was that?
How do you register for the class you're talking about?
You would call our front desk at Outpatient Therapy. So if you want that phone number, it's 520-324-7005. And then you could call and say that I am interested in the Tai Chi class. Please put me on the list. And it is starting on September 29th.
What is adaptive Tai Chi?
So it's more of a modified Yang style of Tai Chi. And essentially it's made to be done, either standing, sitting, with the walker. If you can only use one arm, we can adapt it to anybody, essentially.
Is there a cost?
There is a cost. So the first week is free. So you can try it out, see if it's something that works for you or you'd be interested in continuing. And then beyond that, it's essentially $5 a class or $70 for the 8-week course. So I just do kind of a seasonal class for 8 weeks. And so the classes are an hour long, Monday and Wednesday from 1 to 2 o'clock. So if you're interested, please give us a call. We can put you on the list, or if you have more questions at the end, I'm happy to come talk to you. And then we also, yes.
Again, you said Wednesday of what?
Monday and Wednesday. So it's twice a week from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Good? Okay. So in other words, Tai Chi is great for your balance. All right, so how much balancing kind of practice do we need in order to kind of see a difference in our balance and have a decrease in our fall risk? And the answer is more than 50 hours. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all in one day or all in 1 week, right? But collectively, Yeah, well, once you reach that 50 hours of practicing on your balance, that is where people see improvements and changes in their fall risk. So
Over a week's time?
however long it takes you to get in 50 hours. So if you wanted to go, 3 days without sleeping, you can do it all at once. I would not recommend it, but 50 hours collectively. So that's kind of the threshold. So you can break it into like an hour a day for 50 days, something like that. Yeah, whatever works for you. So we talked about, some of the balance things like your sensation and whatnot. Those are things we can't really change. But these are all the parts of balance that we can change. So we're going to talk about how you can use exercise to improve all of these parts of your balance. Okay, so it includes endurance, flexibility, strength, our coordination, and your stepping strategies. So for endurance, the World Health Organization recommends for sedentary persons, so that means people who don't exercise very much, so when you're 18 to 64, they recommend doing your 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous aerobic activity, along with 2 times a week of strength training. Okay, and then once you're over 65, in addition to your 150 to 300 minutes of aerobic activity, right, it ends up being like 30 to 60 minutes, like 5 times a week, if you wanted to break it down a little more. And you could even break it into like 10-minute intervals 3 times a day for 5 days a week, if that seems more attainable to you. But basically, once you're over 65, not only do they recommend doing your aerobic activity and your strength training, they also recommend 3 days a week of balance training, right, to go along with it. But bottom line is doing some physical activity is better than doing nothing. So the more you can get up, move around, right, the better you're doing. And then if you wondered what moderate to vigorous would be, we can talk about the rate of perceived exertion scale. And so moderate fits somewhere in that you're breathing heavily, but you can still have a conversation, right? So you're not working so hard that you can't get a full sentence out. And then vigorous, so that somewhat difficult activity, that 7 to 8 range, that means, yeah, you're short of breath, you're breathing harder, but you can still get just that one sentence out, right? Whereas before you could speak a lot more sentences in a row. But so we're definitely making you work a little harder, but that gives you a little bit better sense of, instead of just using heart rate, like how hard do you feel like you're working, right? If we want more than that, very difficult is you can barely breathe, you can only say a couple words at a time, right? That's too much. You don't need to work that hard, right? The same thing with the last one, that's like you're running up a hill, right? We don't need to work that hard. But you want to get to where you feel like you're breathing a little harder, right? Otherwise, you're not kind of stressing your cardiovascular system and you're not going to get as much out of it. Okay, so the other thing we can change is flexibility. So basically from our head to our toe, we need our body to be able to, be flexible and adapt to kind of where we are in our environment and keep us upright. So one of the first things is your spine. Yes.
I think everyone should know that YouTube has some wonderful exercises for flexibility. YouTube.
There are great exercises everywhere. You just have to be careful that they are the appropriate exercises for you. So as we were going through this, let it be said, these are kind of general exercises that would be safe for a lot of the population, but maybe not for every single person in this room because every body is different. So if you are having difficulties starting up new exercise activities, I would suggest going to your physical therapist and they can design a specific program designed for your body. Okay, so couple important things with the spine. We want to be able to keep this rotation, right? A lot of times we see people go around and they're walking and everything is super stiff up top, right? And they lose all that nice rotation. So working on just some simple rotation. It could be sitting in a chair or standing, just turning, right? The next one is keeping some of that like bending forward and backward. Now, the big caveat to this is if you have osteoporosis, this may not be a safe exercise for you, right? Because we know with osteoporosis that we don't really want you hunching forward anymore, right? Because that can increase your risk for fractures because your spine is not strong enough. So we really want to focus on keeping you more upright. But there are safe ways to work on some of that rotation. So you saw that picture before where they're laying down and kind of gently bringing things side to side, right? That could be a much more gentle way of getting some rotation or movement in your spine without stressing everything else. Okay. Other important flexible things. So not only your spine needs to move, but also your hips, right? So a couple different hip exercises you could potentially do. One is stretching out the front of your hip. So that's the one you see where he's dangling his leg off the bed. And that may or may not be a safe exercise for you at home. The other one is working on more like hip rotation. So you could do it laying down. You could also do it sitting. Like you've seen people where they bring kind of the leg over. You can either push it down that way or pull it over this way. And then we get our rotation inward and our rotation outward, right? And so we're keeping that nice hip rotation. And then the very last one is your hamstrings. So that big muscle that goes down the back of your leg, that often gets very stiff. And you can even do that sitting down. So she's sitting kind of at the edge of her chair. Her back is nice and straight, if you notice that, because that will make a difference. Yeah, perfect. Here, we will demonstrate. So she's sitting at the edge of her chair. Her back is nice and straight. And we bring one leg out in front, keeping that leg as straight as you can. And for some people, it might be this, and you're already getting a stretch, right? And you don't need to do any more. But if you can get the leg all the way straight and you're not feeling a stretch here, maybe you bend a little bit forward at the hips. Right? So again, not slouching here because you lose your stretch. It's keeping that nice straight back, yeah. And then you should feel a good pull down the back of your leg. Right? Good. How long are we holding our stretches?
Count of 5.
So ideally, somewhere between 20 to 60 seconds, right? We want to give that muscle a chance to lengthen, right? And do we ever kind of bounce in our stretches? No, that's not a good thing either, right? You want to kind of just gently kind of lean into it and breathe there, right? If you can't breathe, then you probably are overstretching. But you should be able to kind of gently lean into it and hold it there. That way you're giving the muscle a chance to lengthen and relax. Okay. Our next one. What's my next one? Your calf stretch. So this one could be a twofer. Not only can you get a great stretch in your ankle here, so important thing, I would probably do it where you could hang on to something. You know, I have a chair here, you could use a wall, the countertop, you know, but that way you don't have to worry about the balance part. You're going to take as big of a step backwards as you feel like you can, and it might only be this big. The other important thing is thinking about where the toe is. If your foot's like this, you're not going to feel any stretch at all back here. So for this one, the more you can turn your toe in, the better, because that locks out the front of the foot. And then again, if we're really hunched over, you're not going to get as much of a stretch as if you're actually nice and upright and thinking about bringing this hip forward over your toe, right? And then you should feel, again, that nice pull. And how long are we holding?
20 seconds.
There we go. Good job. Okay. Perfect. So then we talk about strength. So let it be known, when we were doing our review of all the literature and kind of all the interventions you could do to reduce your fall risk, exercise was the only intervention that could be done by itself and show a reduction in fall risk. Everything else needed something else with it, right? You had to do A plus B plus C. But exercise alone, right, can help and just strengthening the legs can help reduce your fall risk. So again, we're talking about functional exercises. So one of the best ones is just practicing standing up and sitting down, right? So whether you're using your hands or not, either way, this is a great exercise. It's making your legs work, your hips work, your ankles work, right? You're having to balance yourself and get yourself over your feet. So it's a great exercise. In terms of dosing, it kind of depends on how strong or how much you've exercised in the past. Some people, it might be a really big effort to do like 2 or 3 of those, and that might be what you start off with. Other people might, be more active and get up and down a lot more, and maybe you could do 10 or 20, right? So kind of think about where you're at in terms of strengthening numbers, okay? The other exercise, we want our ankles to be nice and strong. So not only do we want them flexible, we also want them strong. So again, I would suggest doing this somewhere where you can hold on to something stable. We're going up on our tiptoes, right? Coming down with nice control. And then if you can, you could even lift your toes up, right? And practicing going back and forth so that you have kind of that sensation of weight through your heels and weight through your toes. And ideally, you wouldn't be doing this, right? We would stay kind of a nice straight line. So we're only making your ankles work. And for some people, you might not move super far, depending on how flexible your ankles are. And that's okay too. But it's more important to kind of stay nice and upright and keep that balance than it is to have the biggest, tallest, up on your tiptoes that you can do. Okay, and then hip exercises. So moving your hips all different directions. So there's kind of 3 big directions we can move our hips. That's the kind of the picture up here. But essentially we can go sideways, right? So you're doing a little leg lift to the side. I'm not kind of moving it way up, right? I'm just doing a little leg lift to the side. So everything still stays in the same plane, right? You could also do a little kick backwards. Again, I'm not bending way forward and trying to get as big of a lift as I can. I'm more thinking about squeeze my bottom, right? That's the muscle that we're trying to work, is right here in our hip. And then the same thing with going forward. You could do a march, right? Lifting your knee up, trying to keep the hip strong and flexible, or you could do a straight leg kick, either one. But you're still working muscles in the front of the hip there. That's what we're kind of targeting. Good. Hamstrings. So a really simple way to work them is just bending your knee. And you get the added bonus of maybe you get a little stretch through the front of your thigh when you do this. And that can be good too. This is even good for like arthritic knees because you're getting a little gentle bending and straightening without kind of really aggravating it too much. And for all of these, if you wanted to make them harder, you could always put some little ankle weights on, right? So if you can do 30 of them and you're like, I feel like I didn't do anything, right? You could add a little weight to it. And again, if you add weight, you might kind of decrease your number that you're doing again and kind of build it up. So as everything with exercising. And then I included one new one, the rows here. So a row is more for your upper body, but a row is really good for posture. So that's targeting these muscles kind of in between your shoulder blades. So essentially, if you have some resistance, you could, have a stretchy band and you're pulling. But essentially, we're going from kind of squeezing our shoulder blades together and then letting the arms out. I'm squeezing them together and letting the arms out. So I'm not pulling my arms way behind me. I'm just squeezing, right? So if you didn't have any resistance bands or any resistance, you could just squeeze your shoulder blades together, right? And then we're just working on this lovely postural muscle that helps hold us upright. Because if you're all hunched over, that's going to affect your balance a lot, right? Okay. How are we doing? Awesome. So we're going to do a little activity all together, but I'm going to explain things first. So when we talk about core strength, right? What do you think of? Your abdominals, right? And they're the main kind of part of your core, your abdominals, but we also have your pelvic floor, We have your diaphragm, right? And we even have the little muscles that kind of let your breath out. All of that is part of your core. They're everything that kind of keeps your trunk nice and stable from here to here, right? So if we want that to work optimally, we want to find kind of your beautiful neutral spine position. So if we look at a regular spine where someone doesn't have any problems with it, you have these beautiful curve here. So it curves in a little bit in the low back, it rounds a little bit in your upper back, and then it curves in again a little bit at your neck. So that if you line everything up, your hips, your shoulders, and your head all end up in this beautiful straight line, right? So that being said, your spine might be curved a little differently than mine, and it might not quite line up perfectly, but we're gonna work and see if we can figure out how to line it up. So what I'm gonna have you all do is, in sitting, scoot forward to the edge of your chair and make sure your feet are nice and grounded on the floor. Okay, so in sitting, the first thing that we're going to start with is your pelvis, because that will determine where your low back is, where your spine is. So if you kind of want to hold on to your pelvis, if your wrist bends that way, if not, don't worry about it. But think about your pelvis as like a big bucket, right? We don't want to spill the bucket of water off the front. We don't want to spill it off the back. We want to hold it nice and level, right? And that should line up your lower back. It should feel like a fairly comfortable position for most people's spines, right? So you should feel like it kind of relieves some of that tension in the low back, or maybe lightly using those abdominals, right? And it kind of lines everything up. So did everybody make their bucket level? Do you feel like you found that? Yeah? Okay, so if your bucket is level, then kind of just pay attention to your shoulders. Are your shoulders sitting on top of your hips? Right? Good. There's a good chance they might be already. And then your head, think about your head. Is your head sitting on top of your shoulders, or is it kind of out here? So kind of play around with that a little bit and see if you can get your ears to line up with your shoulders, to line up with your hips. So if we're building a nice tall building, we have everything stacked up, one on top of the other. Good. And it should feel, it might be a little awkward if you're not used to being in a neutral spine, but it should feel fairly comfortable for your spine. Yes? Okay. So then we're going to find your tummy muscles, right? So put one hand on your belly. Yeah, and maybe even have it high enough up you can just feel the very bottoms of your ribs. Good. Okay, so try just like squeezing your belly for me. Like, what does that feel like? What do people do? Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things people tend to do, not everybody, but some people did it, is they're like, I'm squeezing, right? And you bend everything backwards. Did you see that? So instead of squeezing, you're like, oh, like that, trying to squeeze everything down. But I'm actually doing the opposite, right? I'm squeezing all these muscles back here, and I'm not squeezing anything in front, right? So if we want to kind of cheat the system and make these muscles work, right, we can just breathe. So take a nice deep breath in, and a nice deep breath out. And keep letting that breath out, and keep letting it out, and keep letting it out. Did you find your tummy muscles? Good. So let's try a little activity together. We're going to see if we can count out loud as you're breathing out. So ideally, we should be able to count to a count of 8, right? Okay, so let's try that. Take a nice deep breath in together. And then nice deep breath out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. So how difficult was that? Not too bad? Yeah. Did your voice sound the same the whole time? Or did it get kind of strained by the end? Practicing that can actually help with your core strength, right? It can help with your talking, your ability to kind of project your voice. by getting better at doing that. But did you all feel how your abdominals got tighter as you kind of breathed out more and for longer? Yeah, so those are our muscles. So when you talk about kind of setting the abdominals, right, and finding those tummy muscles, that's what we want, right? So then we can do all kinds of exercises. The biggest thing that your abdominals do is they hold you up and they stabilize everything. So a lot of the exercises that we do to strengthen your abdominals is just practicing getting them to hold you up and stabilize everything. Okay, so we can do things like using your arms as weights and your legs as weights and see kind of how well your tummy muscles can hold you up. So let's try that together. If you are sitting and you're up at the edge of your chair and you find your nice neutral spine, right? And maybe you just very, very lightly tense those tummy muscles, not so hard that you can't breathe, but just that they're working and they're there. And now try lifting your arms up. What happens? Do you end up bending backwards like this? Or can you keep all of this nice and still? Yeah, very good. So try that a couple times. If you have a bad arm, you could do just one arm, doesn't matter, right? But just see, can you keep this kind of the ribs pulling down towards your hip bones, even as you are lifting your arms up? And that's important for like reaching things, right? If you're reaching for that thing on the top shelf and you're bending backwards like this, what's the likelihood that you think you're gonna fall? Right? So the more that we can reach like this, right, and keeping those ribs pulling down towards our hips and keeping that good spine position, the better off you'll be. All right? So then, if we wanted to practice what the legs do, so every time that you take a step, we end up standing on one leg. So now, try lifting one leg up, right? Feel what happens to kind of the rest of you. Do you end up staying up nice and straight and tall? Or do you lean backwards or lean to one side, right? So the same thing could potentially be happening to you when you're standing and walking. Right? So you could practice even just marching here on the chair and seeing how well can you hold yourself nice and stable, right? And if you want to add arms and legs together, by all means, you can get real crazy and get some coordination going, right? Yeah, exactly. But what we're looking for here is, one, are you breathing, right? Because we don't want you to hold your breath. And two, what's your posture look like? Were we able to keep this beautiful neutral spine, or did you lose it?
So is it better to stand versus sitting?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And if you want, you could kind of master it sitting first and then bring it up to standing. And in standing, you might notice, okay, maybe I just need something light to kind of hang on to, right? So that you're kind of lightly pushing down on something. And then again, find your neutral spine. But now we have a few extra body parts to worry about. So if you do it standing, now you have to worry about the feet and the knees and not just the hip. So you might start with your feet and find that's actually our next kind of one. Let's move to that. So when we talk about all our balance strategies, right, we kind of have three sort of main strategies, four you could argue. One is using the ankles. Two is using the hips, right? That's kind of what we use for reaching sometimes. The third one is lowering our center of gravity, right? So you see like the football players, they get nice and low and then they're really stable. It's hard to knock them over, right? And then the fourth one is taking a step. So if I've done everything else and I can't catch myself, I'm going to take a nice big step, right? And I'm going to be stable, ideally, with a step or two or three, depending on who you are. So let's move to the next one. So with your ankle strategies, we need to be able to feel your feet. So that was why sensation was such a big deal for fall risk, because if you can't feel what your feet are doing, right, it makes it really difficult to hold yourself up. You get really reliant on what you can see. So depending on how stable you feel and how tired you feel, if you'd like to participate, feel free. If not, you could do it sitting down. But if you feel able and stable, then we can stand up and find kind of where your weight is in your feet, right? Or you can do it sitting, but just kind of play around with, how does it feel with my weight in my toes? How does it feel with my weight in my heels, right? And it's just a very subtle little kind of movement, right? If you look at me from the side, I'm not swaying a ton, but you can see a little bit of appreciable kind of forward and backward movement, right? But just kind of getting used to, where am I in my feet? And then ideally, where do we want to be in our feet, right? So the majority of the time, we want to kind of be somewhere in between. So you don't want to be all in your toes or all in your heels, because you're already at the end of the line. If something kind of were to bump you from the back, you'll go right over, right? So if we can, we want to kind of spend more time kind of right behind the ball of the foot, right? So kind of over your arch.
Does that
Right.
help if you practice out without shoes on?
You could practice it without shoes on, yes. It depends on your feet and if they need support or not. And if you're in a safe place where they're not going to slip out from under you,
Yes.
right? Yeah. But having a shoe that's a little more firm can be useful. Yeah, nobody has anything that's too bad, but some of those sneakers get like really, really big, thick foam on the bottom, and then it's really hard to feel where the ground is. Yeah. So having a shoe, that's kind of low profile. You're not up on high heels or anything. It's going to be a little easier to feel the ground, right? And then the same thing goes for going side to side, right? So you can feel kind of either side of your foot, right? You'll have the outside of your foot on one side and the inside on the other. And you should be able to go kind of side to side and not tip over, right? And you could practice that as an exercise. You could practice just shifting your weight, right, at home and have something next to you to hang on to. But being able to find that, and then again, can you find where center is? Is your center off here, or is it actually in the middle, right? And if you really wanted kind of feedback at home, you could always look in a mirror and see like, okay, how am I positioned in the mirror? Do I stand like this all the time? Because then I'm not really centered or balanced, right? So being able to kind of find where that center is. Yeah? Okay. Next slide. All right. So the other thing to consider is, where are your feet? How wide is your base of support? So when we're doing the majority of our stuff, right, when you're walking around and doing everyday life activities, you probably want to be more with your feet apart. So the wider your base, right, you're more stable. You're less likely to tip over. As we start to challenge our balance in a safe environment, we can play around with the position of your feet, right? So in your safe little corner, or next to the countertop, or wherever you have your safe location for balancing, you could play around with, what does it feel like if I bring my feet all the way together? Can I balance there? Can I still find where my center is, both front to back and side to side, right? The next position is kind of bringing one foot staggered. So you slide it forward a little bit, right? And again, this kind of narrows our base. You need a lot of hip control and ankle control, which is why we just talked about strengthening those muscles. Because if you don't have enough muscle to hold yourself up here, it's really hard to achieve this position. If you want to make it even more difficult, you go into what we call like a tandem stance, right? Where one foot is directly in front of the other and you're balancing. And you might try, what does it feel like with my right foot in front? And then what does it feel like with my left foot in front? Because it might be different side to side, right? You might have a good side and a bad side. And then the last one is practicing standing on one foot. So what does that look like? Is everything crumpling, when I try and stand on one foot? Or can I hold everything up nice and tall? So it comes back to that activity, finding your core, right? And can I stabilize and hold everything nice and upright when I take weight off of one side? Right? Huh?
How long are you gonna stand?
How long can I do it? A really long time. But how long is normal?
Yeah, normal.
When you're practicing, anywhere up to 30 seconds. So it depends on how difficult it is for you. You might start with 10 seconds if it's really, really hard, and work your way up towards 30. right? So, on a healthy older adult, minimum 10 seconds on one foot. And then, as you get younger, it should be longer. Okay, so the next one. So if you did this as activities, so if you played around with some of those foot positions in your safe area to practice your standing static balance, you could play around with some other things. So for instance, not only can we change the position of your feet, you can change where is your head. So if you aren't able to use your eyes and kind of focusing on that one target, if you were looking side to side, what does that do to your balance, right? Are you wobbling all over the place and your body's following your head, or are you able to kind of still hold yourself centered? Same thing with looking up and down, right? And again, just what your neck does comfortably. If your neck doesn't move very far, it's going to be a lot smaller, right? Same thing, you could do diagonals. So you're looking kind of up to the corner and down to the floor. Same thing, like drawing an X with your head and with your eyes, right? And that can affect your balance, right? Maybe if I stood on one leg when I did it, you'd see a little more wobble, right? Because it makes it a lot more difficult. You can also change what you're standing on. So most people are probably going to practice on a nice firm floor, but we're not always standing on a nice firm floor. We've got dirt and gravel in our yards, we've got different surfaces. Maybe you're stepping over the dog bed, right? And it's big and squishy. And so practicing with your feet on different surfaces, again, only if you are in a safe location, could be another way to change it up. So maybe you stand on a pillow or a piece of foam, right? And that's going to change how much your ankles have to work to hold you up. And then or playing around with standing on a ramp. So maybe you're on something that holds your toes up. Maybe you roll up a towel and put it under your toes. So now you're kind of at an angle and you have to kind of hold yourself up. Or maybe you're lightly standing on your toes, right? But you have the towel under your heels. So you're standing on more of a ramped or incline or decline, right? And that will change kind of how balancing is. And the very last thing, because vision is part of your feedback system that tells you where you are in space, if we take your eyes away completely and you close your eyes, that's going to change things, right? So trying to balance there. But again, only in a safe location. But these are all kind of ideas that you could kind of progress towards. Maybe not all of you are at this level yet. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so those were all under the ankle balance strategies because we're standing still, so it's static balance. When we talk about hip strategies, those are more reaching strategies, right? Like you're reaching for that thing out of the oven, right? You're reaching for that thing on the floor, right? And so those are all hip strategies. You could practice those in a safe way in your home. The next one is your stepping responses. So, yeah, you want to say a few quick words about stepping responses, so the study?
So I find that this is something that we always do all these great things like standing on one leg and standing still. And that's like a nice, happy, safe place to be in balance. The most important kind of reaction that we have is this reactive stepping response. So if the wind blows me, I need to be able to move a foot to change my base. So just a study that we looked at here, when people tend to fall in one direction, their steps need to be in that direction, obviously, right, to catch them. So they quantified this in the study and they looked at, okay, 24% of the people they examined, they didn't have any stepping response, meaning they started to go and their feet didn't move. So this is a big deal because if you cannot change and widen your base, you're on the floor. So basically, as it says at the bottom, it's really helpful for us to work on having patients take huge steps and fast. And if we aren't doing that, then we aren't giving you the full picture. But all the stuff that Kirsten talked about your foundation, your base, if you don't have that base, it's hard to get to the actual balance exercises that are standing up. Obviously, we need that base though.
Yeah, but this could actually even be an exercise to practice, right? Again, in a safe location, you could practice that step forward, right, with either foot. You could practice a step out, right? And you could change around, like, is my foot lifting up off the ground or am I dragging it, right? If you drag it, it's not really going to be very effective to catch you. And you could practice your stepping backward, right? And so that way you're ready when you do go to lose your balance, right? You can take your step or two and stop yourself, and you're not going to fall over because you've already practiced it. It's already kind of second nature, right? So the last one we talked about is just, keep going, the stepping responses. So you could practice it as that activity where you're kind of statically stepping out. You could practice walking different directions. You could sidestep along the countertop. You could very carefully walk backwards if that's something that is safe for you. But making sure if you do this, you have a clear pathway and there's nothing that you're going to trip over, right? You don't want the cat or the dog toy or whatever it is, or the cord there, for the phone. Make sure that you're safe. All right. And like we talked about, safety, right? So if you're doing all the static stuff, you might consider putting your back kind of in a nice little corner. And that way, if you're, tipping over, you have a wall here, a wall there, a wall behind you. Maybe you put the chair in front of you, right? So that you're in this safe little bubble and you can kind of challenge yourself a little bit safely. Because when we practice all of those balance exercises, if you're not having some difficulty and wobbling, it's not helping you at all, right? So if you're standing there perfectly and not wobbling at all, then it's too easy. And you got to pick something kind of one of those progressions kind of further down the line to make it worth your while. Having something in front of you, make sure your pathway is clear, and then we talked about good footwear. So I kind of touched on that a little bit, but go to the next slide, and it talks a little bit more about footwear. So just the idea of what, is on your feet. And barefoot in a safe location is okay, but if you're walking around barefoot all the time, or even in stocking feet, is very, very bad. And actually, they did a study talking about either walking barefoot or in stocking feet, and that actually increases your risk for falling. So they looked at someone over a 2-year period, and those people who consistently went in sock feet or bare feet, they fell more, right? Just because it can be a falling risk. You can slip more easily. So really the safest thing is your sneakers, right? So that nice low profile sneaker that's not super squishy and that kind of fully attaches to your foot, and it has kind of a nice tread on it. So you don't want your high heels, you don't want a shoe with no tread at all. Something kind of right there in the middle is probably the best thing that you can wear. Okay, last couple quick things. When we exercise, starting any new program, should it hurt, right? The answer is complicated, but as you start a new exercise program, you might have some sore muscles, and that's totally normal, right? But it shouldn't last more than a couple days, and it should get better as you move around. If you're getting pain that increases as you're doing an activity, and it just keeps getting worse and worse, stop, right? Don't keep doing it. You're just gonna make it worse. It's probably not the right exercise for you. If you have a little pain that gets better as you do something, say you're doing a stretch and, this kind of hurts, but as you do it a little longer, now I'm more flexible and that feels better. That's a good thing. You can keep going. And then if you have like a little pain and it stays about the same as you're doing something, don't ignore it entirely. Pay attention, but it doesn't mean you have to stop. But what you might do is you might change around something, like you might change your position a little bit. You might make your movement that you're doing a little bit smaller, or you just do fewer repetitions of them. Maybe the first 2 or 3 repetitions you were fine, and then when you get to the 5th or 7th repetition, it's too much. You stop, right? Okay, you're pretty much at the end, I think, right? Yes, so in summary, standing balance stuff, you should be standing. You want to make sure you go every single direction. You want to play around with changing your base of support, so making it more narrow. You want to make sure you shift your weight foot to foot or side to side. You want to improve your strength and flexibility. It should have some element of unpredictability. Be moderate intensity so that you are breathing a little bit harder when you are doing it. And you want to do something every single day if you can. All right, cool. And if you have trouble starting a new exercise program, or you need something tailored specifically to your body, go see a physical therapist. We have some excellent ones across the street. And I'm only a little biased. Okay, perfect, and those are all our options. So, do you have any questions?
So yes, actually, let me start with the online questions. Thank you so much, Kirsten and Geneva. I've got a couple of questions that came in, and one was, if you have a situation where you think you might fall, maybe is there a proper way to fall?
Get as low as you can. Yes, and roll.
Okay, so as low as you can and roll then. Okay, because I know you don't want to put your hands out. I'm thinking, correct? Because you could hurt something or.
That's how people tend to break wrists.
Yes. Okay. All right.
We actually will train people to do this. Like I've had some patients, especially in the people with Parkinson's, where they're falling so much that we are literally practicing how to fall in a good way, which sounds odd, but if you think about it, if you're doing martial arts, like you're going to take falls. So how can you do that and absorb the ground in a safe way? Obviously put padding down and stuff, but that's something we do sometimes. So.
Right. Okay. Well, that's what I thought. So that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I feel like there is maybe sort of a proper way to fall as opposed to not, right? Or at least things to watch out for, to maybe minimize your hurting yourself. Are there any ways that you can, are there any risks that you can tell maybe before you fall, before it happens, that you go, wait a minute, I need to maybe sit down before I fall? Is there anything in particular? I mean, dizziness, numbness, anything that would stand out as a potential risk?
It's just going to depend on the person and what their specific kind of triggers are. Like some people, they'll just get fatigued, they'll get more droopy, they'll drag their feet, right? Your feet might kind of weave, you're stepping kind of one foot over the other, like things like that. But everyone is going to be a little different.
So they just really need to just pay attention to what signs might work for them from the sounds of it. I know if somebody wants to come see you at outpatient therapy, it does require a referral, right, from your physician. I do want to go ahead and put up the phone number again for the outpatient therapy. It is 520-324-7005. Again, like I said, you do need a referral, but you guys have a wonderful clinic across the street. Can you tell them where that's located?
It's 5395 East Erickson.
On Erickson. So just across, south of Grant, on
South
the
of
Grant, across from the hospital, across from the main.
Yes, we are south of the hospital.
Yes. All right. I want to thank you so much for being here. I'm going to wrap it up with our online audience, and I will turn it over to you for any questions in person. Thanks for being here today. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you'll be back again. Our next talk is actually tomorrow. It is Comfort First, Rewriting the Pain Narrative in Cancer Care. This is part of our new survivorship series. That is for Thursday, September 11th at 10 a.m. with Dr. Shana Simmons with our TMC Palliative Care program. If you would like to join us for that class and you have not registered yet, please give us a call in the office. The phone number is 520-324-1960. Thanks again. We'll see you tomorrow.